Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to askNK. Today we're taking a look at 3dcoat Textura. 3dcoat Textura is made available by the folks at Pilgrim, and they're the same creators of 3dcoat. So the idea for 3dcoat Textura is for you to easily texture your 3D models by simply using the PBR workflow that exists with this tool and get things up to speed. This is more like a streamlined version of 3dcoat that deals specifically with texturing. So for those who like to test this, you can simply go over to the link in the description where you can download this and play with it for 30 days, or you can simply use the coupon code in the description as well and get 5% off any purchase you make on the Pilgrim website. Now the coupon code is available from now till the 25th of April, so just in case you like to save up and purchase some things from the folks at Pilgrim sometime within the year, you can still refer to this video and take a look at the coupon code. 3dcoat Textura comes with a couple of features, and as well you'll be able to have a library of over 500 plus PBR scan materials that you can use. There's just a whole lot of things that you can do with this. So we're looking at per pixel texturing, the p-text texturing, the micro vertex texturing, and so much more. This also ships with a very cool renderer that you can also take advantage of, and at the same time there's just a whole lot of things that you can do with this. So with this said, let's dive directly into 3dcoat Textura and see how this actually works. So with 3dcoat Textura open right here, how you work with this is pretty simple. Now if you're familiar with 3dcoat, you probably noticed that the UI looks pretty similar. So getting started, we're going to take a look at the per pixel texturing, as you'd also be able to find the micro vertex and the p-text. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to get started with this so you can see how to work with it. Now once you select that, if you do have a model you like to texture, you can click on this button to import it, or you can select and play with any of these presets that comes with it. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and select this beautiful robot, and it makes sense to look at this because it comes with most of the things that we'll like to explore. So one of the things you'll notice once you load up your mesh is the viewport, and how you navigate across the viewport is by holding down Alt on the keyboard. With the left mouse button you can update, Alt on the keyboard with the middle mouse button you can pan, and Alt on the keyboard with the right mouse button you can zoom in and zoom out, and that is pretty simple. If you hold down Shift on the keyboard with the left mouse button, you can play with the environment light. So the environment light exists right here, and you can change this IBL, which is the image-based lighting, however you want. Now with that said, let's discuss some of the other things that you'd notice within the UI. Right here is the tools and brushes you would need to texture this model. You'd also notice that you have your color palette right here. You'd notice you also have your brush properties and any tool that you select here. The properties exist right here. You'd see a couple of panels, and these panels are divided into three. The first one majorly deals with the brushes and the color palette. The second one deals with the texture editor, some presets, the stencils, and also smart materials, which we're going to talk about later. And the last one deals with the layer, the paint object, the surface, Sculpting, which I have no idea why we still have this, and of course the layer blending. And how I love to work with this tool is pretty simple, as I simply drag the layer and drop it right over here, as this is basically more useful for my workflow. So with this in here, you'd also notice that once we're working and we move across this point, that we have a couple of widgets. Now the widgets that you notice here are used to control whatever you have within the viewport. So the very first one deals with the contrast, as you can use this to increase and reduce contrast within your viewport. You'd also notice that we have another one that deals with the lighting, and this turns the light. So basically everything that you have here is just viewport oriented, all right? So if you like to see the floor, you like to take it out, you like to snap stuff, you like to focus on the object, probably you want to go full screen, you want to switch this from perspective to orthographic, you know, basically everything you need to control your viewport exists right here. You'd also notice we have a tiny camera that can help you switch to different angles depending on what you want. So with that said, let's explore the painting. So for you to get started with the painting, you'll notice that we have a big brush. Now this brush is being controlled by the alphas that exist here, and you can control the brush radius by using the middle mouse button to scroll in and scroll out. You'd also notice that we have a curve in the middle of the brush, and this is for the depth. The depth can be controlled from here, but if you like to use your mouse, you can use the right click to move this up and down, and this controls the depth as well. So what is this depth? This depth is basically considered as a height map, and to show you how this works is pretty simple. So I'm just going to go in and change the color to something that is a bit bright, and then I'm going to make sure that I have this depth all the way up and paint, and of course you can see that. And if I take the depth all the way down and paint, you would also notice it. So if we move the environment light, you would see that we have that depth right in there. So if you don't want to have the depth, of course, you can simply turn this off and do your painting. But if you like to keep the depth, you can also do the very same thing. And painting with this is very, very interesting, as 3dcoat Textura actually obeys the UV islands that you have. And what I mean by that is this simple. So you notice how we have this gigantic brush, and I would like to just paint through it. And for example, let's say I just want to paint only this object. So if I click and drag, you would notice that it paints just this object and it doesn't intersect with this one. And this is very useful. We can also click and drag and do the very same thing. Now, this doesn't stop you from painting across the other objects. You can, but this is just pretty impressive. And the same thing happens with the fill tool. So if we go over to the fill, and let's say we like to fill several parts of the object, we can. And to do this is pretty simple as well. Have the fill object selected. I'm also going to go ahead and turn the depth down, because we don't need that. And what we can do is as simple as clicking on one surface and we'll fill that. Let's also make sure that we have the opacity cranked all the way up. Click right there, we have that filled. We can do the very same thing here, right there, right here, right over there, and here. And you can see pretty impressive. Now, all of these things we're doing exist within this layer. And this layer also has a couple of layer properties. So you can choose to play with the opacity. You can choose to play with the depth. If you don't want to have the roughness, you can take the roughness out. And of course, you can do the same thing with the metal opacity. It is also worth mentioning that individual layers have more properties that you can access by clicking on this drop-down button, and you can see all of them from here. So depending on how you like to blend your layers at a given time, you can take advantage of these and make some very good decisions. And what about masking? So let's say, for example, you like to mask what you have. If you like to mask stuff, it is pretty easy. So I'm just going to, double click and call this pink, for example, and then we need to create a brand new layer. And this layer is going to be our mask. So I'm just going to call this pink mask. And this is the mask. So to mask things here is as simple as clicking on this button, go over to the section, select the layer you would like to use as a mask, and this is it. So if we go in and start painting, so I'm just going to switch over to the mask and start painting, you would see what we have. Now, if you like to see what you have, and let's say you want to paint things out, you can also do the same thing. Select the pink layer, which is the layer that has the color. Click on this drop down and click on invert clip mask. So if we go in and we start painting, you notice that we're having this paint on top of it. And if we also switch to a given color, we're painting the mask, you also notice that this is painting, but this isn't what you want. You want to mask this out. So what is actually happening is this layer that we have here is painting because we have the opacity on. So if we turn off that opacity and we start painting, you notice that we can use it as a mask. And of course, if we turn it off, you also notice that it still exists. And the only way to get back, this other one that we had before is if we go in here and we choose to remove or say don't use this as a clip. So once this layer is used as a clip, we can use it as the mask and actually mask things out. And this is basically how you mask with the 3dcoat Textura. So let's go ahead and get rid of the mask. I'm taking that out, click on this drop down, take this totally off. So we have what we want. Now, it makes sense to know that there's a couple of things that you can play with that exist with 3dcoat Textura that is so much fun. And one of them is playing with stencils. So if you go over to the stencils section and you select the stencils, you'd notice that you have all of them here. So let's say, for example, you want to paint all these things in, you can. I'm just going to add a brand new layer, double click and call this stencils, press the enter key. And in this case, if I would like to paint all of these things by hand, can go in and paint these things all by hand, turn this off, and you can see the result that we have, which is pretty cool. Other things that you can do right here is you can play with the size. So if you like to scale this in, we can do that. We can scale this all the way in, we can scale it all the way up, depending on what we want. We can also choose to use this to paint details on a certain part. So I'm just going to scale this all the way down. Actually, let's scale this all the way to this point, and I can paint right here. So this is pretty cool. We can do the very same thing here. Go right over to this point, and we can use it to paint right here as well. So this is pretty impressive. It also makes sense to note that if you do have a brand new layer and you like to fill that layer with the stencils that you have, you can also do that. So let's just get this all the way there, right click and click on the word fill entire layer, and this would fill the entire layer with the stencil that you just have here. So let's close that, and you can preview this and see what you have. So this is a very quick way of getting things done, which is pretty impressive. And you can mix this however you want, delete it, keep it, fix it, whatever you want to do. Yes, you can. And for those thinking about working with text here is also very, very intuitive and useful, as in this case, if you like to put a text from one point to another, all you need to do is click on the first point and click on the final point where you want it to be. And in this case, we can type in the word 3dcoat, press the enter key, and you can see that we can change the color of the text with what we have here. We can also change the font, and you guys know I love me a Montserrat. Select Montserrat. Let's make that a bold Montserrat, and that would be cool. Can also bring this right to this point. You know, you can do all of the editings that you want. Depending on what you want to get, you can get this ready. And once you're good to go, click on apply to get that in. But once you have that there, click on the brush tool, and you can see that we have that text right there. If you would like to have depth to that, it also makes sense to know that once you're working with the text tool, that you make sure the depth is turned on. The same thing applies to curves as well. So if you like to add some curves, let's say you want to create curves across your painting, and these curves can be modified at any point in time, depending on how you want to work with it. You can change the color of the curve. So I'm just going to set this to green. And, you know, if you like to have depth, you can throw in a couple of depths in there. And once you're okay, you can click on the word apply, and that would apply it. Now, I guess this application is based off the number of vertices that you have within this, since we're using the per pixel painting to get this done. So once you're done, you can have that there. If you like to erase stuff, select the eraser, and you can easily erase things out. So pretty impressive stuff that you can do with 3dcoat. Something that makes a lot of sense, I know lots of you guys would love to see, is working with smart materials. The smart materials that exist with 3dcoat is just a joy to work with. So you can select from a long list of smart materials that exist here. And in this case, let's say we're going to go with metal. So with the metal here, I can select the copper old, and with the copper old right here, let's also go in and open this up. So with copper old here, it makes sense to know that 3D Textura does this very impressive thing. You can preview the smart material before you proceed to apply it. And the same thing applies to 3dcoat. So you can preview the material. If this is okay, let's say you want to see how this material will apply in a particular place, let's say a place like this, you can preview it. If this is okay for you, you can now create a brand new layer and start painting that material in. So this makes sense because in most cases, you want to confirm what you're working on before you proceed to apply it. And this is pretty impressive. And for those who just want to apply things directly, let's say you just want to get it over with, you can do the very same thing that we did previously with the stencil. So you can right click and click on fill entire layer, and this will automatically fill the entire layer with what you have. So this is also pretty dope, as it makes a lot of sense to see that that is also feasible. Let's try something else. So if you like to also apply something like the brass, you can also get that. So we have the brass going on here. We can right click and click on fill entire layer, and that would also fill the entire layer. So depending on what you want, you can, go ahead and get the most out of it. And for those who like to edit the materials that they have, so let's say, for example, we'll apply a material like this onto the model. Let's just add this material, fill entire layer. Let's say you like to edit this material. You can also choose to do that. All you need to do is double click on the material, and you can play with all of the individual properties that makes up this smart material. Let's say you like to change the opacity. You can drop that opacity all the way down. You can see that if you like to change the color, you can change the color to red, and you can also see that right there. And you can also do some more stuff. Let's say we'd like to also make this a given color. Let's just crank this a little bit upwards. And you can see that if you like to make your own materials, you can change the name. So in this case, we have it as metal forged. I can put the word new behind it. Click on OK, save as new material, and this will become a brand new material on its own. So we can now right click and click on fill entire layer. And every time we come back to 3dcoat Textura, this material will be waiting for you. So let's select that layer, move that down, 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 a little bit lower to this point. Lovely. So we have it right there. Let's drop the opacity a little bit low. I think we need to drop it a little bit lower, and that looks good. Let's drop the depth a bit lower as well. That looks pretty nice. Looking good already. And now let's talk about rendering. So what if you like to render what you have? Actually, let's drop this to about 10. I think I'll love it a little bit. Yeah, 10 looks good. So if you like to render, what you can do is simple. Switch from paint over to render. And from here, you can start making all of your render decisions. So go over here where you have your render engine, click on this render engine button, and you notice that we'll start rendering this. This is what you had previously, and this is what you have now. Looking nice. If you like to increase the exposure of your HDRI, you can increase the exposure. This is totally up to you. If you like to add some lights, some more lights, you can click on the plus sign and add some more lights. So in this case, I'm just going to add a green light. I don't know why. Let's just add a green light, and we can rotate this light wherever we want. So we have this light right there. We can also increase the intensity of the light. Looking good. And this doesn't look bad at all. So we can also add more lights if we want as well. So we can add a white light, and we can increase the intensity of the white light. And we can also rotate this light to a given part. Let's raise this light a little bit upwards and change it to tiny bluish tint light. And just make that a camera target. Let's make the scattering a little bit more. And this way we have some light. I probably don't really like the, the green that we have there. So maybe we can look for something more soothing. Yeah, maybe something like so might be cool. Click on OK, and there you have it. So for those thinking about working with Symmetry, how you can work with Symmetry here is pretty easy. If you go over to the Symmetry, you can either activate Symmetry by clicking on this button, and you get this menu where you can select if you like to work with the X, Y, or Z, or you can proceed to press S on the keyboard and you get the same thing. And it's also worth mentioning that you also have a couple of other things going on here. So in certain cases, you might want to freeze some parts while you focus on other parts. So with the freeze brush, you can freeze this part. And then if you switch over to your brush and let's say you would like to start painting, you can proceed to start painting. Let's increase the brush size and you can paint and it would not affect this part. So you can do this for several parts of your model. So in this case, if we also go over to the freeze brush, and let's say we like to freeze this small area, we can also do the same thing. So once we start painting, you notice we don't alter what we have right there. So this is very useful. You can still choose to switch this freezing. So if you hold down Shift, Control, and I on the keyboard, just like you would do in Photoshop, you can invert the freeze or invert the selection. So in this case, we can now go in and paint some other sides and not affect a given side. So this is pretty useful. And just like you do in Photoshop, if you hold on Control and tap D on the keyboard, you can also deselect this. Something else that is also worth mentioning is the magic wand. So with the magic wand, you can select individual groups or individual sets within the UV islands or within the object, and you can freeze this part. So this is more like a selection thing. So any part that you get to select, that part doesn't get affected. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete what we have here. And I might make another selection here. If you hold down Shift, you can add to the selection and we can do that right there. So with that done, if I right click and fill this layer with this smart material, you would notice that we have only those layers filled. And just like we mentioned, hold down Shift, Control, and press I on the keyboard. You can invert that and I can apply the dot smart material to this part. So once you're ready, deselect this and that way you now have something looking pretty impressive. You can also choose to work with any of these brushes that exist here. And if you like to clean up stuff, you can use the eraser to erase whatever you have. And when we talk about some other things that you might need to know, if you look right here, you would notice that we have 3 different icons. And these icons are pretty simple. So we have this that controls the depth. So in case you don't want to have depth and you just want to paint through without having depth across, you can just use this and all you're going to have is the gloss and color. And the same thing happens here. If you don't want to have the gloss, you can also turn that off and you're only going to paint in the color. And this is pretty impressive. And right now we can go in, paint in the color, and that is how it is. So anytime you want to start doing your texturing and you don't want to get into, playing with the depth or playing with the glossy all the time, you can simply turn this off and get up to speed with it. One more thing is right here. If you click on this drop down and probably you want to add some brightness to what you have, you can go over to the layer which you have, like a dedicated layer like this. And if I click on this drop down, we can go right here where we have the brightness and we can increase the brightness. This can stand for emission and at the same time you can play with the contrast depending on what you want. So this is pretty impressive and lovely, and depending on what you want to create, 3dcoat Textura actually brings a whole lot to the table. So this is more like it for those looking for alternative to Substance Painter, and probably you're looking for a tool that is very flexible, a tool that you have a one-time purchase for, and at the same time you have an unprecedented, pretty impressive renderer that you can use to get things up to speed, then you might want to consider checking out 3dcoat Textura. This is an amazing tool, and all we've just done is just scratch the surface of the amazing things that you can do with it. For those who would like to support this Ukrainian company known as Pilgway, creators of 3dcoat and 3D Textura, link to this is going to be in the description, so do well to check it out. At the same time, if you'd like to try any of the softwares that they have, you can also go over to the link in the description that'll bring you right here, where you can see all of this and play with them. Tell me what you guys think about this one in the comment section, and of course if you like this video or you learned something from this, you can go ahead and give a like, and don't forget to share with a friend. And until I see you guys in the next one, peace.